case you missed it in class, I'm going to go over our Lesson 5 notes one more time really quickly in this video. So, in case you missed it or need to watch it again, so we're talking about domain and range in this lesson. So our concept is domain and range. Domain is all the inputs of a function, meaning the x values, and range is all the outputs, meaning the y. I will be referring to them as x and y instead of inputs and outputs. So domain goes with x, range goes with y. There are two different notations that we're going to be using. Interval notation, which uses brackets and parentheses, and inequality notation, which uses compound inequalities. So let's just go over interval notation first. So this is going to be something like a comma b with parentheses. It could be a to b with brackets, or it can be a mix of one of each, a parentheses and a bracket. Inequality notation is a compound inequality, and so it's going to be separated by less than symbols. You will never have greater than. Or they could be less than or equal to. So as you notice, they're always going to be a less than. Now, you may be wondering where the variables in the middle come from. So x represents domain, y represents range. So if you're finding domain and you're using inequality notation, you put an x in the middle. Now, let's talk about what it means to have a parentheses, a bracket, a less than, or a less than or equal to. This is what I call when a number is included versus not included. So, if the number is included, you're going to use brackets and the less than or equal to sign. If a number is not included, you use parentheses and the less than. All right. So our first example, domain is all the numbers that are more than 3, but at most 5. So let's start with interval notation for the domain. We have our two numbers, -3 and 5. And then we just look at the phrasing. More than 3. So more than does not include it, so it's going to be a parentheses. At most does include it, so we're going to put a bracket. So we're going to stick with domain, and now that we have it in interval notation, we're going to write it as an inequality. So we use the same numbers, -3 and 5. Now -3 is a parentheses, so it's just going to be less than. Since we're on domain, it'll be x in the middle. Since 5 was a bracket and it included it, it's going to be less than or equal to. So now for range. Range is all the numbers that are at least 2, but less than or equal to 12. So for interval notation, our numbers are 2 and 12. At least 2 means it's included, so a bracket. Less than or equal to 12 means it's included as well. So we have 2 brackets. We're now going to take this over into inequality notation. So 2 is less than or equal to y, because of the range, is less than or equal to 12. All right, our next one, write the domain 4 to 15 in inequality notation. So we're dealing with the domain and inequality notation. So 4, since 4 has a bracket, it's going to be less than or equal to. Since it's domain, x in the middle. And 15 has a parenthesis, so it's just going to be less than. Our next one, write the range in interval notation. So we have -6 is less than y is less than or equal to -1. So since it's less than on -6, it's going to be a parenthesis, -6, comma, and then -1 is going to be a bracket because it's less than or equal to. The final thing we need to talk about are restrictions. There are going to be times where there's going to be a restriction on your domain and range. So let's look at our word problem. The price of an adult ticket to the fair is $12, and the price of a child ticket is $8. The fair made a total of $120 on Monday. So write an equation. So our adult ticket is going to be X, and our child ticket is going to be Y. So we have 12X plus 8Y is equal to 120. So now we want to identify the domain. So X relates to adults. So adults are human. We cannot have pieces of an adult. So this is a restricted domain, meaning we have to list out all our options. The easiest way to do this is find your minimum and maximum first, then fill in the numbers in between. So the minimum amount of adults we can have is 0. So we're going to start at 0. Then to find the maximum, we cover up children and we solve 12x is equal to 120, which is 10. Now we just fill in between 0 and 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Almost ran out of room there. And then there's one thing we have to add. When we have a restricted domain or range, we use our squiggle brackets to put on either end. So we ask ourselves, why is the domain restricted here? We can't have pieces of an adult. So just ask yourself, can you have a piece of this something? And there you go. Those are our notes for today.